one more article, and it's also about censorship and free speech and weaponization of free speech. And this was written by a new friend over at Substack, a Substack called The Revolution Continues. And I believe it was written by a person named C.A. Matthews. I could be wrong. I love this graphic. I thought it was great because it's literally what social media is doing, and Google is destroying free speech at the behest of the White House
also,
and the government.
They're missing a lot. They've all fired, but guy's still up.
Yes,
you know,
they are. Yeah. That is a lot of smoke for a guy still standing. But yet,
right?
Perseveres. So
Should
this
be
is the
blanks.
dystopia that you
Most
were
of them would
warned
be
about.
blanks.
This is the dystopia you were warned about. A mind-controlled populace thinking, speaking, shopping, moving and voting in accordance with the will of the powerful. All that's left now is to secure the few dissidents on the fringes and keep bolstering the mind control matrix. This doesn't mean it's hopeless. It just means we've got to acknowledge reality and start working from where we're at. The biggest obstacle to real freedom is the belief that we already have it. That is, of course, brilliant Caitlin Johnstone that he's quoting. Yep. Weaponizing Free Speech by C.A. Matthews. Most Americans believe
Caitlin's another one of those Indie Media Award winners, right?
That is correct. Most Americans believe that no one has ever gotten into trouble simply for speaking their mind, unless you're Lenny Bruce or Daniel Hale or Julian Assange. No matter how much you might disagree with a fellow American, you probably agree that they have a right to free speech. You believe that freedom of speech is a basic right protected by our Constitution. You feel confident that all Americans have the right to believe and express themselves as they deem fit. Sorry to break it to y'all, but you don't.
Elon talked about this with Bill Maher this week too.
Free speech is not guaranteed, as demonstrated. Yep, like he said, by the latest U.S. government shenanigans. The feds have charged 4 African Americans simply because they are members of the African People's Socialist Party and expressed opinions that don't align with the current administration's viewpoint. According to the Black Alliance for Peace, quote, the unsealed indictment states that Tuesday, April 18, 2023, a federal grand jury in Tampa, Florida, levied charges of conspiring to covertly sow discord in U.S. society, spread Russian propaganda, and interfere illegally in U.S. elections. While no evidence of conspiracy, propagandizing, or interference has been presented, the APSP and its members have the right, as all citizens do, to freely criticize U.S. domestic and foreign policy. Not since the Palmer raids in the early 20th century, nor since the indictment of W.E.B. Du Bois in 1951, or the confiscation of Paul Robeson's U.S. passport during the anti-communist McCarthyist era, has there been such a hysterical response to African people asserting their rights and freedom of speech in the United States.
The Black Alliance for Peace, always makes me think there's got to be a Black Alliance for War too, just got Wesley Snipes and
that's the Expendables.
Just the most badass.
That's
right.
The cast
yeah,
the
right.
Expendables. The Department of Justice claims APSP members had weaponized free speech by expressing solidarity with the Russian people and conspiring to interfere with U.S. elections. This makes me really nervous because this language is very
McCarthyite.
Well, not just that, but it lumps us and everybody that we hang out with, talk to, and amplify and showcase.
I know.
Anyone?
Don't remind them.
Yeah. Okay. So Matthew Olson in the DOJ's press release regarding the indictment stated, quote, the department will not hesitate.
I don't know what you're talking about.
To expose and prosecute those who sow discord and corrupt U.S. elections in service of hostile foreign interests, regardless of whether the culprits are U.S. citizens or foreign citizens, individuals abroad.
Speaking of Discord, on Discord.
Sowing discord, Jimmy Dorsey is sowing discord, and we are actually on Discord, correct? Independentleft.media. Fomenting Discord. But what? Yeah. Foreign individuals abroad, meaning citizens of other countries. How? Well, Julian Assange. The quick translation is that the DOJ is prosecuting U.S. citizens for political speech and related activities because they're worried that more and more Americans don't agree with the status quo of the uniparty and might support the incumbent in the upcoming presidential election, might not support the incumbent. The grand jury alleges that a Russian national directed these Americans to publish pro-Russian propaganda and information designed to cause dissension in the United States. Now, if you listen to Chairman's speech that Greg Big Mad Crab over at INN had recorded on March 18th, he said, I've had these policies and these positions my entire life. I've been speaking out against imperialism in the U.S. government and the war machine my entire life. And now I'm a Russian? Hell no. Hands off of Huru. Hands off of Huru.org. All right? Stop the FBI attacks on APSP. And there's also an excellent video on the Jimmy Dore show where he goes through it. And shout out to Jimmy Dore for covering this. Thank you to Jimmy for covering this.
There's also a playlist on INN of all the times we've had Uhuru members on. In case people want to go check that out.
All right. Omali Yashitella, who has had 2 interviews in the last year with Tara Reid on INN, APSP co-founder, voices how the U.S. government apparently doesn't believe that African Americans are intelligent enough to come up with a socialist philosophy all on their own or know if or when they're being used by a foreign power. Obviously, the FBI feels scared enough of an 82-year-old African American man that they had to use violent tactics to break into his home to handcuff and arrest him. And it's a terrible story when you hear him talk about what they did to, they handcuffed him and his wife and they had him sit out front in front of all their neighbors. They tried to embarrass them. I take
drones flew by their heads. I had asked him after, we were talking after the show and we were talking about RBN, used to be Fred Hampton leftist. He said that was the first person I thought of after that raid was Fred Hampton. And I didn't have to say anything more than that. Like, I was like, I know what he's talking about.
Yep.
And it's fucked up.
So he says, I take all the Biden administration's legal mumbo jumbo to mean that the Dems can't afford to have any real competition running against the corpse of Joe Biden for a second term because he and his war in Ukraine are that unpopular. They must shut all dissenting voices down, no matter how fascistic it makes them look. I suppose the white supremacists at the FBI couldn't wait to do something this evil, too. Did I just say that out loud about Biden being a corpse and the FBI being Klansmen? Should I be watching out the window for the feds to arrive any minute on my doorstep carrying flashbang grenades? I do believe in the pen is mightier than the sword, the truth shall set you free, but when an army's worth of federal agents can show up at your front door and take you away simply because you're an 82-year-old African People's Socialist Party member who doesn't agree with the U.S. government's racist and warmongering actions, can anyone ever be too careful speaking their mind? Will believing in the truth and the power of free speech save us from government abuse? Again, let's go back to Caitlin. Quote, it's not reasonable for the government to just dismiss the First Amendment on the grounds that it's being weaponized. You can't have your government dictating what speech is valid and what counts as agitprop and disinformation, because they'll always define those terms in ways which benefit the government, thus giving more power to the powerful and taking power away from the people. I love her.
Yep.
Support Caitlin Johnstone too, but also support The Revolution Continues. They're a great Substack. Speaking of abuse, although there is nothing quite as horrific as what's happening to the APSP members, I was accused of using weaponized free speech this past week as well. I found myself a victim of corporate censorship. So, for the first time in 8 years of writing and editing this weekly blog, a warning appeared at the top of the blogger posting page. And it read, your post was flagged to us for review. We've determined that it violates our guidelines and have unpublished the URL, Bernie2016.blogspot.com, and this was literally from May of 2016.
That's fucked up.
Making it unavailable to blog readers. C.A. Matthews. Say what? What could we have published? Yeah, where's the other half of that? Where's stuff going? What the fuck?
It's here somewhere.
Seriously? What the fuck?
Thank you. That's what I was waiting. I was waiting for the what the fuck.
Fuck.
Yes. Say what? What could we have published that was so heinous? Well, what was so heinous that it be hidden from public view now? Why was Google, who owns Blogger, all of a sudden so upset that it had to censor the post "Who is stealing our election" after 7 years? The post was published in early May 2016, long before Trump and his followers' denials of the 2020 election results began. Well, that's because that was right after they rigged the primary for Hillary. Literally, June 7th, I believe, was the day that that it was over, that Bernie conceded.
Pokemon, go to the polls.
Oh, I want to puke. The date of the post should have been a dead giveaway about whose election was being stolen and by whom. Flashback, Bernie was being royally screwed over by the Hillary Clinton campaign in early 2016. The trolling of Burners online was dreadful, and as an editor of what was then known as the Bernie blog, I gladly published almost every decently written submission sent in by Bernie supporters. A short piece called Who is Stealing Our Election was the first of 2 short pieces that I edited and published that week, so I titled the entire posting with that catchy question. Who would have thought that 7 years later, a bunch of neoliberals would get their knickers in a twist, or panties in a bunch, so much that anything that sounds remotely like a Trump supporter might say about the 2020 election must be completely blocked from public view, censored forever. And that's interesting because Jimmy Dore has made reference to the fact that usually they won't censor you if you talk about election interference in 2016 or any other election besides 2020. But here it is. Google is now going after the 2016 election people that are saying that Hillary rigged it too.
Isn't there a shut the fuck up shitlib video that's about this?
I think
as
so.
Well, where it's like them going back and forth and
that's Turncoat Don, the dueling deniers.
Turncoat. My apologies.
Election deniers. Shout out to our buddy Turncoat Don. Dude, we want you back. Come back in.
Sub to him.
After a quick edit or self-censoring of the title, Blogger allowed the post to live again. I didn't change a word of the posting, just its title. Somehow that change made it acceptable to Google for public consumption. The English-speaking public once again has been saved by the brave censorship of private agents working behind the scenes for the U.S. government, or in this case, the Joe Biden re-election campaign. They put up this funny graphic. It's a meme. We do not censor. We just put establishment narratives at the top of all searches. We move content we don't like way down a list so people are not likely to ever see them. We hide groups we don't like and make them difficult to find, but we don't censor. Wow.
So they say.
Well, sometimes we remove content we don't like and block people from posting for days at a time. We also close down individual accounts and delete whole groups, but this is for the greater good as we see it, and we don't call this censoring. Thanks, Facebook and Google. And what exactly are we being saved from?
Lying.
What are we exactly being saved from by corporate censorship? What didn't you have the right to read because the powers that be wanted to protect your delicate sensibilities? From what I can gather by the Blogger policy page, it's most likely this. Do not distribute content that deceives, misleads, or confuses users. This includes misleading content related to civic and democratic processes, content that is demonstrably false and could significantly undermine participation or trust in civic or democratic processes. So like saying that the machines are all unauditable and potentially vulnerable and that nobody knows whether they're actually accurate or not. Yeah, that's accurate. But they don't like that because this includes information about public voting procedures, political candidate eligibility based on age and birthplace, so birtherism, election results, or census participation that contradicts official government records, saying that they didn't count X number of illegals, for example. It also includes incorrect claims that a political figure or government official has died. That's legitimate. All right. Been involved in an accident or is suffering from a sudden serious illness. How many times have they reported that that Putin has cancer though, and that he's on death's bed? Like, what about those? No, that's favorable to U.S. interests, so they'll allow those. Now, why would anyone have any doubts about Joe Biden based on his age or from suffering from a sudden serious illness such as having a stroke or dementia, or that he hasn't died already and is simply a walking zombie? It's not like he's ever been seen babbling like an idiot on camera or wandering off a stage or looking to shake an invisible hand, is it? Not this week. Oh, wait. Right. I apologize if we've ever misled you with the content here at The Revolution Continues or made you not trust in civic or undemocratic processes, but that was never our intent. The post from 7 years ago was simply a burner's lament over how the Clinton campaign had stolen Bernie's primary wins. Well, we live and learn and move on, don't we? The Dems haven't stolen any primaries from their rightful winners since 2016, right? And it's not like they're canceling the Democratic primaries and and debates in 2024 either, right? If you believe those last two statements, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you, or its equivalent in the Midwest, your choice. Let's remember Linus and Charles Schultz saying that if it can be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be destroyed by the truth.
Linus' tech tips?
Well, he's pretty good too, but Indy's tech tips. Free speech is a right. That
not the same?
No, not quite. That free speech is a right that no American should ever take lightly. People have fought and died for your right to express yourself freely. People have been imprisoned around the whole world for expressing themselves and sharing important and sometimes embarrassing and incriminating information about government. One such journalist springs to mind, Julian Assange. This past week, Julian marks the 4th anniversary of Assange becoming the guest of His Majesty King Charles in England's Belmarsh prison. In other words, an Australian journalist has been imprisoned in the UK because his crime of journalism that has made the US government very angry. Assange dared.
So unlike the guy in Russia who's a Russian citizen,
he's an American citizen.
Right. What?
But yeah, Assange dared to publish on his online platform WikiLeaks, the infamous collateral murder video. He exposed the lies of many governments, but he was particularly prolific in sharing information about the U.S. involvement in the bloody war in Iraq and the tortures of detainees at our super-secret base at Gitmo. And so far, nothing WikiLeaks has ever published has been proven false. Assange is being charged under the 1917 Espionage Act. His case raises troubling questions about whether it breaches both the First and Fifth Amendments of the Constitution. The Espionage Act criminalizes journalism by ignoring the fact that the First Amendment makes an exception for a journalist possessing and informing the public about state secrets that reveal government crimes and corruption, which is exactly what the Iraq war logs did, as did the Vault 7 leaks.
Yep.
Assange's indictment should be dismissed on the ground that the Espionage Act's overreach is an existential threat to First Amendment freedoms. For a U.S. court to do otherwise is to undermine due process and threaten the First Amendment's guarantee of a free press. But we'll see. This administration's paranoid take on free speech being used as a weapon seems to be the driving force in his continued imprisonment. That and the fear of what would happen from the military-industrial complex if he ever tried to let him go. Populations don't like wars. They have to be lied into it. Quote, that means we can be truth into peace. This is a great cause for hope. And that is, of course, Julian himself. Free Julian Assange. Just like the APSP members speaking their minds in our blog, posting a short piece with an incendiary title implying that elections can actually be stolen in the United States, Julian Assange is being actively censored. He is being blotted out of human memory, locked up to wither away behind bars without trial, his reputation smeared by Western governments because they didn't like what he had to say, and they don't want the rest of the world to know what he yet has to say. Other independent journalists have been censored, mocked, and threatened recently. Remember Matt Taibbi and Seymour Hersh? We featured both of them.
Oh, Seymour Hersh.
Yes.
Seymour Hersh was the one who made sure we knew that Free Willy and Flipper bombed the Nord Stream pipeline, right?
Right. Well, among
Seymour
that, but first it was the My Lai massacre and all the other things. But yes, recently we featured both of them on the blog not too long ago. They're also being harassed by the U.S. government and their corporate media partners. Matt is even being threatened with criminal charges of lying to a congressional committee for a mistake made by a network propagandist who interviewed him on MSNBC, as we talked about with Mehdi Hassan.
One letter.
Ridiculous.
That was actually still right anyway.
Seymour Hersh has been ridiculed, and his Substack posts about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline bombing have been blocked on Facebook and labeled as disinformation, redirecting you to a site in Norwegian. If you ever needed more proof that the U.S. government doesn't believe in the public's right to know and practice free speech, the demeaning treatment of these two malign journalists prove it. Hey, I know that lady. Sexy Susan. Julian Assange's case is so important because we've lost journalism. We've lost the ability to now find the truth. And she also, I believe, is part of the controlled opposition operation. Sorry, folks.
Yep.
To all of you who are still reading at this point, I have just one word of advice, one world of advice that says to you, in case you ever feel compelled to censor yourself and not use your right of free speech as a weapon for good in the world. Don't. No matter what the corrupt government threatens, no matter what the corrupt corporations that do their bidding threaten, nothing, absolutely nothing, is as important as free speech and your right to express yourself fully. It is your inborn right. It is your duty to continue to speak and write freely. It is your inborn right and your duty not to believe or agree with or even acknowledge the lies and propaganda put out by untrustworthy powers that be. Because if you don't believe in and practice free speech in spite of the risks, then who else will? Well, that's just a reminder.
Yep.
And we're not always big fans of the Green Party, though. Right now, they're somewhat decent. I'm not a big fan of Howie Hawkins. I think they're trying to rig their primary, too. I don't think they're much better. However, the Green Party U.S. stands with Assange and demands that the U.K. not extradite the U.S., drop the charges. Journalism is free speech and not a crime. Thank you, Joe Biden, for reinforcing that. Now actually exercise it and drop the charges on Julian Assange. Instruct Merrick Garland to drop the charges.
Yep.
And that is the final story I had for this evening. Those are our don't forgets for later. But that was that was good stuff. The revolution continues over on Substack. The revolution continues.substack.com. Good stuff.